Okay.
Okay.
What are you going to do?
Well, I'm just going to ask you some questions. And first off, I'm going to talk to the camera here. Well, this is Jim Herndon. I am Lee Herndon's son. And I'm here with Mary Lou Herndon, as we call her Mama Lou. And this is July 25th, 2005. And the purpose of this is to talk to Mom Lou so that we can pass down history to not just ourselves, but to following generations. So, what I want to ask you first off is, what I'd like to know is earliest known relatives of yours. So, for instance, I know a little bit about your mom and your dad, but I don't know anything about your grandparents, or even earlier than that.
I don't know much.
Okay, well.
I don't remember much.
Well,
I remember you saying something about your Big Daddy's daddy. That you,
Grandpa Bora.
Yeah,
He had a white mustache.
right.
And he sat in front of the fireplace, very ruling.
okay.
And I was the only grandchild that could sit on his lap. And he would say, "Come on, babe, you can sit over here." And the other grandchildren hated me. Really, they did. You know,
Well, why do you think that he only let you on his lap?
'cause I liked him. And I would stroke his beard, you know.
Yeah.
And there was a feeling between the two of us
Okay.
that I can't describe. I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
But I could sit in his lap and he'd pat me, you know, and that world was safe, you know, from then on.
Where did he live?
He lived on the farm,
Okay.
County Line Road.
Okay. And so your dad inherited the farm from him?
No,
Okay.
not that farm.
Not that farm? Okay.
No, Dad bought the farm where we lived.
Okay. So
Where
Cataline.
did he live?
Well, you know, the 183, and you know, you turned on to what was the road going?
County Line Road.
County Line Road. Okay, where you turned there, that corner on up was the old first labor property. You know, there on up there was a pond, and then on up there was a driveway, and the house was back off the road, an old house. Somewhere there's a picture of the old place. Now, where it is now, I don't know. With
Now
all these moves and everything, I don't know where anything is anymore.
So his name was Libor.
Yeah.
And do you remember anything about possibly his parents that you would be able to say?
Well, they came from Germany.
Okay.
My grandmother was English. She came from England.
Okay.
There, and she was the old English type.
Okay.
And of course, she died, and then he married again. He married Marlborough. You probably remember Marlborough. Well, okay, but anyway, she was a very sophisticated gal,
Okay.
and of the old school. And they all disliked me because I was her pet. Now, Mary Lou goes and all, she pets her. She doesn't pet me. You know. Well, I was little. It didn't mean a thing to me.
So you were both a favorite of your grandmother and your grandfather.
Yeah. Well, she died very young, really. And then Grandpa Moore married again. And he had another family, you know. And I was never close to her.
Okay.
Just, I was good to her and she was good to me. But there wasn't that connection
Yeah.
like I had with my real grandmother. And my real grandmother was pretty sophisticated.
Well, your granddad you said he was from Germany. Was he born in Germany, or was he born here in the States? And his
No,
parents were from
he
Germany?
was born in Germany, and
Really?
then they
Okay.
came to the States
Okay.
and settled in,
Kentucky?
well, yeah, up in there somewhere.
Okay.
Well, Mom, that's important now. Did he?
Well,
he
I've
was
got
in-
all that written down somewhere.
I think he went to Virginia.
Right. When they first came, they all went to Virginia,
And then he moved to
Kentucky.
Okay.
Hmm.
And the reason he left Kentucky is because of the New Madrid earthquake in about 1810 or 1812. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you happen to know what town he would have been in Kentucky?
It was in western Kentucky, and it was somewhere near Paducah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Paducah's
I
thing rings a bell.
Okay. Okay. And your grandmother then, you said was from England. Was she born in England, or was she born in the States, and her folks were from England? You said she was the English type, so there's a good chance she was probably born.
Yeah, yeah. She probably was.
Yeah.
Jim, where are my records?
I don't know. We will find them.
We'll look for them. All right, and on Lewis's side, do you happen to know anything about his grandparents?
No, not really, because I didn't know then.
Okay, okay. I wasn't expecting that. I believe his dad, though, was a doctor. Is this correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, he was one of the first doctors in Dublin, Texas.
okay.
Rode a horse
Yeah,
to make his calls.
okay.
Do you remember one time when I was in the attic and I found Dad's saddlebags?
Yeah. And where are they now?
Well, I think we gave them to Uncle Charles because they still contained some medicines.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I guess Charles got them now where they are now. God knows. But, I'm sure that's where they went. There was a big attic to that big old house. You remember the house, but you probably don't.
Well, we've driven by it, the Dublin house. What was the address in Dublin there? for that house?
512 North Patrick.
512 North Patrick. Okay.
I remember that.
We're going to talk a little bit about that a little bit later, too. Now, your parents, are they in the cemetery that is...
Bear Creek
Bear
Cemetery.
Creek Cemetery, yeah.
Yeah.
Right off 360 there? And,
Yeah.
Okay.
They're on back at the back.
Okay.
And,
Your grandparents are there.
yes, the Terrells are there.
The grandparents are there, and your father, Big Daddy, is there.
Yeah. My grandmother was a Terrell,
Okay.
and her parents are there.
Okay.
And, well, that enclave of people that first came to that community
Right.
from England or Germany or wherever they came from,
Right.
that was their burial grounds.
Okay.
It's a very, very famous cemetery, but people don't realize it,
Could you tell me a little bit about the Terrells? Do you know anything about them?
No, I really don't.
Okay.
They never did come into the picture that much for
Okay.
me.
Well, tell me a little bit about your siblings then. Your brothers and sisters. What are their names, and tell me about them.
Ruth,
Okay.
and then son, Lebore Jr.
Okay.
That's it.
What do you remember specifically about your parents?
Oh, Jim. These questions are blurry at me.
Well, I remember you, Mom Air, just a little bit when I was a child.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing a story about her swinging a chicken around by the neck.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. She decided we were going to have chicken for dinner, and she'd go out and pick up one and wring his neck, clean his feathers, and bring it in and cook it. Ah!
Well, your mom sounds like she was a tough lady, but what else could you tell me about her?
Well, she was tough. She was a terrific seamstress.
Okay.
She made all my clothes, and
Yeah.
I mean they were well made. And I decided, and all my life, I'd find something, and we'd go to Neiman Marcus and look in the windows, and I'd say I'd like that, and she'd stand there, and when people weren't watching her, she'd draw it off. Go on, make it.
Okay.
And but as far as housekeeping, she could care less.
Oh, really?
You know, unless somebody was coming. Then we all got busy. And she was a good cook.
Yeah.
And when she wanted to cook.
She
What-
used to fry roasts, right? And
Right. Fry them before she baked them.
and
What did she like to cook?
Huh?
What did she like to cook? Just
Well,
about any-
whatever was available
Yeah.
at the time.
Cobblers.
She made a good cobbler, yeah. She could fry okra better than anybody I've ever had. But, you know, those little things you remember.
Right.
And she was not the best housekeeper in the world, you know, she could care less. But until she decided she wanted to clean, and then, God forbid, you know, we all had to step to.
Mom, I remember that you told me she had one speed when she drove the car. It didn't matter
Right. Whether she was going down the straight way or whether she was coming around a corner. She had one speed,
What was that speed?
about 35 miles an hour.
All right.
Too fast, I'll tell you. Of course, she scared me to death. But,
You told me one time she drove 35 to 40 miles an hour in the driveway.
right, she had no conception of what to do, you know. Of course, you know, automobiles just came into being, you know.
Mhm.
Daddy he was one of the 3 owners of an automobile in Dallas County,
The Buick.
a Buick. I remember that car. Somewhere there was a picture, but where it is now, I don't know.
I've seen that picture.
Now where it could be now, I don't know.
Well, tell us about your dad then. What was he like?
Well, he was, of course, he was my idol, you know.
Yeah.
But very strict to a certain extent. Very stately when he was dressed up. He
Yeah.
could look like a ragamuffin on the farm. But when he dressed, he looked like he was the President of the United States. You know, he was very stately.
Yeah.
And he was a graduate of Baylor University.
All right.
And so he was educated. And I don't know what else to say.
Well, was the farm his business, or did he have another business?
No, the farming was his business.
Okay.
Wasn't he a 32nd degree
Mason.
Mason?
He was big in the Masons and the Shriners. He was
Mhm.
a big fella there. And went to meetings in Dallas. But
Well, Dad was mentioning about how he remembered that you all had electric wiring and one of the first Buicks. So,
yeah, and we had the first, it was called the Delco system,
okay,
which was electricity,
okay.
in the big house.
Mm-hmm.
And they had electricity put in. Ooh, we had electric lights. We had to pull a switch, turn them on. We didn't have the you know, knobs on walls and things.
Do you remember how old you were at that time?
10, 11.
Okay.
And that was in the big house.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big 2-story house sitting back. You remember the farm, Lee?
Right.
And you remember where the driveway was up through the house. No, you wouldn't remember that because
I don't remember much of anything about the house that burned.
well, you wouldn't remember. And you know, as far as I know, there's not a picture anywhere of that
You
house.
said it was a 2-story house. What was
Yeah.
it? What color was it painted?
White.
Did it have decks in the front or in the back? Or
No. It had a porch, front porch, the length of the house, and then upstairs, it had a porch in the middle of the porch downstairs. I don't know how to put it. I could draw it, but I could,
okay.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
And we went upstairs, and then there was a hall, and you could come out on that little porch upstairs. On each side there were 2 big bedrooms. Back of one of them was an attic thing, and Daddy had a trunk in there, and it was filled with pennies. I remember that. Every time he'd get any pennies, he'd go throw them in. And of course, when the house burned, they all burned.
A full truck of pennies, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. So when it burned, it all burned together,
Yeah,
all those pennies?
yeah.
Wow.
And when the house burned, it just, you know, just, what?
How many bedrooms were on the first floor? Any?
One.
One.
Was that your parents?
No, they were upstairs. That was the guest bedroom.
Oh, okay.
Had pretty furniture in it. I
Yeah.
remember the furniture.
What else was on the first floor?
A big living room area, and a dining room area, and a kitchen. And then a porch, and 1 bedroom, and a porch that went around.
What do you mean went around? Did the porch...
At the back.
Okay, so you had a front porch and a back porch.
Well, get me a piece of paper somewhere. I don't know where you're going to find a piece of paper laying.
Should we do spec your suggestion?
Anything. Oh. This was the house. And upstairs, and this was a porch. I can't draw, Jim, so. And there, this was the living room. This was a bedroom. And this was a hall. Upstairs. And this was the front porch, all the way across. It was a big 2-story house. And upstairs were 2 big bedrooms with an attic back of this bedroom here. And that's where the pennies were.
All right.
And an old-fashioned trunk. I can see that trunk this day. One of those, you know, barrel-top trunks.
I bet you like looking in there.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'd go in there and feel those pennies.
Yeah.
Why? And every time he'd get any pennies, he'd throw them in there. There's no telling how many pennies were in there. And of course, when the house burned, they all burned.
So you had a Delco electrical system.
Right.
What about bathrooms?
We didn't have bathrooms, Lee.
Okay.
We had potties on the outside. Toilets, we call them. And when we took baths, they brought in the tub and we put it in the kitchen and took a bath.
Heat up water on the stove?
Huh?
Heat up water on the stove?
Right.
Right.
A great big house and they didn't put a bathroom in it. I'll never know that, understand that. But that's the way it was.
Yeah. Well, what did your dad farm? What was his? What did he raise?
Cotton and corn and wheat, grain.
Did he have a lot of help, or?
Yeah, well, the farm had 2 tenant houses on it. This was the driveway up to the big house. And there was a tenant house down here. And then over here on this side of the property, there was another tenant house. And those were the workers that, did the work on the farm.
Which one of those tenant houses was the one I remember with the pump in the middle of a field? There was a house that I remember in the middle of one of the fields with a pump.
Well, that was the main house. That was the big house where we lived that burned.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the big house. I remember the night that house burned. I was sitting in the car with Lee and son.
Do you think your dad was a strict boss? Was he a good boss? Do you remember much about that?
I think he was good. We had an awful lot of black help, and they called him Mr. Lee.
Mm-hmm.
And they were good to him because he was good to them.
Yeah.
If they needed a little money, he'd always act like he wasn't going to give it to them. I remember that. What do you need it for? Well, yeah. I could see him reaching his pocket. He always had money on him.
Yeah.
Now, where he kept that money, I don't know. But he always had money on him. He could reach in that pocket and pull out these ones, bills. I remember that. But where he kept it in the house, I have no idea.
What did y'all do on the weekends?
Weekends meant nothing to us on the farm, you know. Same as any other day.
Did you help him on the farm, or what did you do when you were growing up?
What do you think? I didn't know what it was to help. One day, when they were picking cotton, I went in the house and I said, "Mama, I want a sack. I'm going to pick cotton with them." "Well, I don't have anything to make a sack out of for you." I said, "Find something." Well, I don't know what she found. But anyway, she rigged up a little sack and put a little shoulder strap on it. I went out with the blacks and picked cotton.
Mm-hmm.
They laughed. We'd get up to where Daddy would weigh, the cotton, see how much, each one was bringing in. And they'd stick a little cotton in my bag. And Daddy would say, "That's not hers. You take it out and put it in your bag. Now, Mr. Lee, just leave us alone." I can remember a frog and them saying, and the other blacks, "Mr. Lee, you just leave us alone." But
I remember Frog. He had a lump on his.
yeah, Joe. But, and of course, he finagled Daddy a lot, I knew it. I can remember that. But that's all right. He came through with the blacks when Daddy needed the blacks.
Do you remember when Big Daddy broke his rib and was walking down the road, and Frog and the other people were helping him come home?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, that's it. They just helped him back to the house, And I ran out, and he said, "Babe," he called me Babe a lot. "Babe, I think I hurt myself." "Oh, Daddy." My daddy was king. And,
I was very young, but I remember that.
yeah.
Well, tell me about the fire. What happened? How did you think that started, and what were your experiences of that?
When the house burned?
Yeah.
Well, Daddy was at lodge. Daddy was a big mason. And he had gone to lodge, and we had gone up to my aunt's, where we went every lodge night. And my Uncle Arthur looked out the front door. They lived in a big 2-story house on up from our house. He looked out the front door and he says, "My Lord, what's that?" Well, everybody went to see, you know, and it was our house on fire. I'll never forget that sight in my life. You know, to look out and see this blaze. And I was not very old, what, 9, 10, something. And what caused the fire, nobody ever knew. It was sad, I'm sure. But anyway, and it made quite a fire because it was a big 2-story house.
Mm-hmm.
And but it burned flat to the ground. I can remember the next morning going over there. I was, what, 9 years old or something. With Mom and Daddy, I can remember going over there. And Mama was scraping through trying to find a silver, you know. Sad experiences for a kid. You know?
Yeah.
And she was crying, trying to find herself. It was a sad, sad time. That made an awful impression on me as a child. Been scared of fires ever since. You know,
Yeah.
it's a blast to me. And that's one reason I always check everything before I leave. 3 times probably. Because I have a horror of seeing another fire. And, but, that's life. I don't, how are we on to this?
Where did you live after the fire?
Daddy bought, well, we rented a house in Grapevine. He rented a little house. The Wiggins rent house, I'll never forget it. It was right next door to Ms. Wiggins' house, which she had a great big white house. And we lived in that little house, I guess, for 6 or 8 months. Until Daddy could finally buy a house, which was right close to the school.
Do you remember the address?
Huh?
Do you remember the address?
We didn't have addresses then.
Okay.
It was right down the block and over here.
Okay.
You know.
I was thinking about this too. Do you remember an early phone number? I know I'm pushing you there.
You really are pushing me.
Yeah.
But it was so much and so many rings,
Right.
you know. But,
Well, okay. Well, tell me then about that time when you moved into the house in Grapevine. I'm assuming those were your teenage years?
what was I? I was 9 years old, I think, when the house burned.
Okay.
And maybe I was older than that. I was in the 4th grade, I remember that.
All right.
How old would I have been? Been older than 9.
A little bit, but not
Yeah.
much.
Well, I started school early.
Did you? You could have been. You could have been.
But anyway, I was in the 4th grade. And I had started school, see, in this little rural school, Estelle School. And, but Daddy taught me. I got the Grapevine in the school and I knew everything they were already doing, you know. But anyway, that was the 4th grade. And they rented a little house, Ms. Wiggins' house, I remember. She had a little rent house right behind her big house. And we lived there until this house was available that Daddy bought in Grapevine, which was just right next to the high school, grade school and high school. And so they decided it'd be better with all of us going to school, you know, for them to live there rather than go back to the farm
Yeah.
and rebuilding on the farm.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that house?
The house they bought?
Yes.
I think it's still standing there. It was a big old rambling house with an outdoor privy. I remember that. I just liked that very much. And but Grapevine didn't have any system then. It wasn't until later that they put a system in.
Do you remember what street that might have been on?
Oh gosh, no, I don't even know the street out of name now.
Yeah.
Because it was just the old high school, the old schools, the grade school and high school were together, you know. There was Main Street, and then this street came down, and then here were the schools, and right over here was our house, which was half a block from the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And you want me to turn that off?
Yeah, Dad, would you turn down the AC or so that it's not on?
Just turn it off. The switch is up there at the top, Lee. Turn it off.
Okay. Grapevine High School is where you went to school then,
Yeah, that's where I finished high school.
right? And do you have any just specific memories from that time in your life?
No, no specific. It was a
Okay.
happy times,
Yeah.
you know.
How long did you live there before you moved back to the farm place?
Oh gosh. I was out of college when they moved back to the farm. Ruth and son went to school in Irving, Texas, you know.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, they went to school in Irving, Texas. And rode the school bus.
So you moved back to the farm before they started high school.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Well,
of
you
course, I was older than they were, you know, so that was their life. My life was entirely different from their life.
you went to school at Texas Women's then for college,
Yeah,
and what was your degree in?
arts, dramatic arts.
Oh, really? Okay. Were you a
I
big
was going to go places.
Were you a
didn't
big
do
theater
nothing.
person?
Uh,
Were you a big theater person?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What kind of shows
Drama-
were you in, or?
Well, just the dramatics that they had there, you know. In fact, finally, I wound up teaching there for a while in the department,
What did you teach?
in the dramatics department.
Beginning acting, or?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Couldn't do it now, but I did it then.
Yeah.
That's so many years ago. Oh, God.
Did you go back to school then and get a degree in education, or?
No,
Okay,
I just had a bachelor's from TOC.
in dramatic arts.
Yeah, right. And at that time, the schools weren't that prolific, you know. And they were searching for people to work. And of course, I was available. So,
Were you in the music department at all, or was it strictly
no,
strictly
straight
theater?
into dramatics.
Okay.
No music.
Mm-hmm.
So you taught there at TWC for a while.
Yeah, yeah.
When did you move to Bartlett?
When I got a job in the public schools.
In
Making a little money. I wasn't making any money there. And so then I finally applied for a job. And I got a job at Bartlett, Texas, teaching school, 4th grade. And that's where I met your dad. He was with CCC camp there in Soil Conservation Service. And we all ate at the same boarding house at Miss Joiner's. Everybody that taught school that wasn't married ate there, and all the boys that weren't married that were working at the Soil Conservation ate there. And that's where I met your daddy.
How did he approach you? You just saw each other, or?
Well, we just saw each other.
Yeah.
I was going with somebody at the time, you know, pretty steady. And just eventually we melded together, you know.
What year was this?
Oh, God. Jim, I'd have to go back and figure it out.
Well, I wanted to ask you too about the Great Depression and what that time was like, because I'm assuming we're talking about this time period.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Great Depression was bad. It didn't affect me.
Okay.
You know, Mama made my clothes. I had what I wanted. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Daddy did well.
Good.
Financially.
Good.
For that time, you know. And we didn't live prosperously, but we always had plenty. You know. There was never any question. If I wanted something, I got it.
Yeah.
As Mama used to say, all she had to do was edge up to her daddy, and she'd get it. But Daddy was older when he married, and I was the firstborn. And of course, there were several years before Ruth and son were born. But we were very close. You know.
You and your dad and you and your folks.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
And I could always edge up to Daddy, get what I wanted. In fact, we were in Dallas one day. We were shopping, and there was a big store across from Sanger Brothers named Cans, K-A-H-N-S. And anyway, we were walking by. I was with Daddy. And we were walking by, and they had a girls' department. And there was a beaver hat in the window. I'll never forget that beaver hat. And I looked in the window, and I said, "Oh, I like that hat, Daddy." And he says, "You do?" I said, "Uh-huh." And he says, "Well, let's go in and look at it." And I don't remember how it cost or anything, except that Mama said too much, too expensive. You shouldn't have bought it. Daddy said she wanted it. And it was a beaver hat, you know, with a streamer hanging down the back. I'll never forget that hat. And if the house hadn't burned, I'd still have it. But anyway, that was just one of the experiences that stand out in my mind, that beaver hat.
You were talking about Dallas. Did you all make it into Fort Worth more or into Dallas?
No, Dallas.
Dallas?
Now, Daddy owned a building in Fort Worth.
Okay.
And he went in to collect the rent every month.
What kind of a building was it?
Do you remember North Side at all? You know, there was a point that came out.
Yes.
Well, that point was what Daddy owned.
I know that, but what kind of building was on
It was a brick building, office building.
office building?
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's all I remember. But that's where it was. And I remember going in as a child, going in with him when he'd go in to collect the rent.
Do you know if that building is still there or have they replaced it?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I'm sure the street's still there like that because it came to a point.
Okay.
And I don't think.
It's right near what is now Joe T. Garcia's restaurant.
Not too far from Joe T. Garcia's. Yeah, it's on toward town from Joe T's.
Okay. Well, Old Town Dallas then. Well, I say Old Town, but what do you remember about Dallas in that?
Sanger Brothers
Yeah.
store in Dallas. That's where I grew up,
Okay.
in that store.
What did they sell?
They had a children's department,
Mm-hmm.
and every time Mama went in, the three of us went to the children's department. They had games, and they had a supervisor, and that's where people with children would take their children and leave them while the parents shopped.
So did they sell just about everything, kind of like a Sears, or?
Yeah. Well, the Sanger Brothers is still there, I'm sure, in Dallas. Been there for years. But it was a good department store.
Okay.
And right across the side street from Sanger's was the men's store named Cans, Kahns. And that's the store where my big beaver hat blew off my head and landed on top of that building. And we were coming out of Sanger's, and the wind was high, and it blew off my head. And Daddy saw it land up there on top of the building, Cans. So we went over to Cans, and some man there went on up, and I was holding Daddy's hands, I remember. And we found that on top of the building. Strange little incidents that happen in your life.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get back to meeting Lewis. And you met him at one of the dinners.
Yeah. Joiner's eating establishment where we all ate in Bartlett, Texas.
All right.
All the teachers, single teachers, and all the men that were single. We all ate there. It was a long, long table. And
He was in charge of a CCC camp, is that correct?
he wasn't in charge. He was an engineer there.
Okay,
He wasn't in charge of the camp. He was in the engineering department.
all right.
And that was one of his early jobs. And he was not too far out at A&M. And there were 4 or 5 of those men that ate there. And then there were 4 or 5 of us gal teachers that ate there. We had quite a time. And that's where I met your daddy.
Well, how long after that were you married? I know the date of your birth, which was September 14th,
1914.
1914. And what day did you get married?
May the 29th. Year what? You were born in,
September the 9th, 1939.
okay. I guess we married in 38. We'd been married a little over a year when you were born. I remember that.
Okay.
So married in 38.
Okay. Were you still in Bartlett at the time, or where were
Yeah.
you married? Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
We rented this little house, the Carmody house. They built it as their home.
The what house?
Yeah, and
Which house was it?
the little house at the end of the street there, their house was the big red brick next door.
You said Carmody?
Yeah, Cormany built the house. And then they built the big house next door. And we rented the little house, which was a little 2-bedroom, real nice little place. A nice little yard. And your daddy had a rose garden outside. I'll never forget that. And everybody in town wanted to see Lewis Herndon's rose garden. Then at the back, he put in a vegetable garden. It was a big lot. And there was a double garage with a building with the quarters above it. And we leased those quarters to a black couple. And she helped in the house some. So.
Well, then the years before the war, then Dad was born in 1939.
Yeah.
Where did y'all live when Dad was born?
Bartlett, Texas.
Okay, still in
Yeah.
Bartlett.
He was born at King Daughters Hospital in Temple, Texas.
All right. And then did y'all do another move before the war, or was it?
No. Then there was the war,
Okay.
and I went. I just disbanded. I don't know. I followed Lois, for a while.
You sold your house then in Bartlett. Is that right?
Yeah. And then we kind of headquartered with Mom Herndon in Dublin, really, until the war was over. And
Now you spent some time in California.
well, that was during the war years, So
Lewis was stationed there.
Indio, California.
Was that training then before the war? That he was stationed there in California?
Well, he was an officer, so he was training other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Dad mentioned something about a rattler in a crib. Tell me about that.
In Indio, California, there was.
Oh.
You remember?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, somehow, this snake got in the crib, and we found it before I would put the little one in.
Yeah.
And I guess we had been gone somewhere. I don't remember the details to it now, except it was frightening.
Mm-hmm.
And how it got in the house, hell no, I don't know.
It was a sidewinder rattlesnake.
Yeah. And they don't coil to strike. Sidewinders don't. They strike. They don't coil to strike. Most snakes coil to strike,
Right.
but sidewinders don't. And most frightening experience I've ever had in my life.
How'd you get it out?
Well, I got Lee out first.
Yeah.
I was in the crib.
Yeah. And it was down at the foot of the crib. And then of course Lewis got the snake out. How it got in the house, when it got in his house, nobody knows. But I was so glad to move out of that house. Of course, we didn't move till we didn't move out of the house till he was transferred out.
Well, Lewis went to the war then, and you went to Dublin after that.
Yeah, off and on when I couldn't go with Lewis.
Okay. Were you teaching during this period, or were you at home with them?
I was home with them.
Okay. And what were your experiences of the war? Just sitting on pins and needles, reading the newspaper every day, or
Well,
what do you remember
and
about
following him from
Yeah.
station to station.
Well, one of those stations was Augusta, Georgia.
Georgia.
Now tell us about Augusta, because that's where Bob was born.
Yeah, a big 2-story house. Well, not too far from camp. I've forgotten what that camp's name. All this is written down somewhere. And anyway,
You were very close to the Masters golf course.
right. It was right on down from where we lived. And I remember watching the crowds come and go, during the tournaments. Wasn't interested then. Well, didn't have time to play golf. And, but it was a big house, and we had the lower floor.
And Bob was born there at the camp hospital at the.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of it. All that's written down somewhere. Yeah, he was born there. And can't remember the name of the house, but I remember the house, of course. Big old house. High ceilings, and wide halls. And we had the lower floors, all we had. And big, big kitchen. Big bathroom. It had a bathroom. An indoor plumbing, which was, we were glad for. And, but it was a comfortable old place, you know. No garage. Park the cars outside.
You had indoor plumbing in Bartlett in the little house that you rented, did you not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you all were stationed in California, in Georgia. Was there another place that Lewis was stationed before he went overseas?
Jim, I'd have to go back to my notes where I don't even where my notes are now.
What about Fort Hood?
No, that was just a jaunt that he went, camp that he went to. I never did move to Hood at all. No.
Did you used to ride the train from Augusta to Texas any? I remember riding the train one time with Mom Herndon, and I think we were going to Augusta, but I'm not certain of that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right. Or you were coming from Augusta. I had gone back in the car. I don't know how I'd gotten back, but anyway. And then Mom brought you on the train.
I remember that, and we went through New Orleans.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Well, then your experience during the war was raising two boys with a husband overseas.
Yeah, and you know, you did it because you had to do it.
Yeah. Was a lot of your news through the Army itself, through the newspaper, through Lewis's letters, or?
Through Lewis's letters altogether.
Okay.
You followed where the battalion was, you know, or something like that,
Right.
if anything came up. But you didn't get that much news from the newspapers, you
Right.
know. It was only from his letters.
Right.
And those letters are somewhere, God knows where, in a trunk somewhere.
Well, I know he was in the Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, 8th
and-
Engineers,
Okay. And
293rd Income, 293rd
Engineering,
Combat Battalion.
Engineering Combat Battalion.
Yeah,
293rd.
293rd Engineer Combat Battalion,
In the what army?
3rd Army.
3rd Army.
That's all I remember.
That was-
It's all written down somewhere.
That was Patton, is that right?
Right.
And what was he? What was his rank at the time?
At that time, it was colonel.
Okay.
He was a lieutenant colonel.
Well, he wound up a colonel.
Right.
He was on the road for general, and he got out. Thank God.
So he was in Europe during this period.
Yeah, I had about 3 years with them.
Right. Do you know about any of the particular battles that he was involved with? Okay.
He wouldn't talk about it.
Really?
He didn't talk to you at all about it?
Uh-uh.
Do you remember one time him talking to the First Baptist Church in Bryan, Texas about
Yeah.
the war?
Yeah. I learned things then I never did know before. But
Dad mentioned specifically that he saw one of the camps of the Holocaust there. Do you happen to remember what that was?
it's all written down somewhere.
Okay.
God knows where that is. Where is all that?
So after the war, he really didn't talk about
No,
Yeah.
he never did talk about it.
Do you feel like
You had to pull things out of him. He was not one of those that went around talking about this happened, that happened, you know. He was not one of those. When he came home, he wanted it out of his mind.
did he ever get together with any of his comrades at a later
No,
date?
not a big deal.
Okay.
Occasionally he would find out where some of them were, and there would be a conversation or so, but there never was a big reunion or anything like that.
Right.
No.
I remember several people calling him on the phone.
Yeah, asking him questions.
Were these historians or?
I don't know. I don't remember.
There were
Okay.
people that he served with in
Uh-huh.
the war.
They're noticing all of that somewhere, somehow. God knows where they are now.
What do
After
you-
all these moves.
What do you mean notes? Did you write a lot of this down and keep it in a diary?
Yeah, somewhere, somehow.
So okay, what you're telling me is you kept a diary of
No, I didn't keep a diary. I just every now and then would make a note of something
Okay.
and throw it.
Mhm.
And you think those notes were in a trunk?
Somewhere. But Lee, God knows.
Did he ever write any of this down?
He wanted to forget it.
Right.
That was part of his life he didn't want to remember.
Well, I remember seeing photos of a trip that you took to Holland. There's
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
a very large possibility he was in Holland. Did he talk about anything at that time, or?
Well, I went with him, you know, to
Yeah.
Holland.
Mm-hmm. Did he tell you?
That was in 1963.
Yeah. Yeah. I was with him in Holland. Hotel de Vinci de Berg.
Did he mention anything about his wartime experiences while you were there?
I don't remember any specific. You know, I'm sure there were conversations. Had to be. But specifics, I wasn't making notes.
Do you remember when Dad came back from the war?
Yes.
You met him, as I understand it, in New York City.
I met him in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay, he came back and landed in
Wound up in San Antonio to be released. And I went to San Antonio to meet him.
That was
And
the
left you all with Mom Herndon in Dublin, Texas.
Okay, that was the first time you saw him after he was over.
Right, right. I never forget it.
One of the things that I remember is that what he wanted when he came back was a big green salad.
Yeah.
Tell us
Yeah.
about that.
Well, that's all I said. He was just starving for fresh vegetables. You know, green salads and things like that he hadn't had in years. And he would leave the meat alone, but he'd eat the salads. You know, I'd kind of forgotten all that, Lee.
He was a big fruits and vegetables
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
Well, I remember when you came back then from San Antonio, you woke me up in the middle of the night.
Right. So Dad could see you. Dad says, I'm going to wake him up. I don't care what time of night it is. Because he hadn't seen him. So he waked him. And I said, now you take care.
That was in 1946.
I
Was it
guess, but
46?
I'd have to go back to my notes. Now, you know, somewhere I have all that written down. God knows where it is now with all of my movies and all of my...
It was in 1945 or 46.
Well, the war ended in '45, but they were. I I'm guessing they were stationed in Europe until they found out that they were not going to Japan. Is that correct? Do you remember anything?
Well, he came home from Europe. Now that
Right.
you know,
Do you remember where in San Antonio you all met?
St. Anthony Hotel.
Okay. Great.
I'll never forget that.
Great.
Because Mom Herndon kept Lee and Bob, and I drove down by myself. And I can remember when I pulled up at the hotel, the boy came out, of course, you know how they do. And I said, my husband has just arrived from Europe. I've got this car. I need to get rid of it. Park it somewhere for me and tell me where you park it. And Lois was already there. He was already in the room. I remember going in and I asked which room it was in. And I went on up to the room by myself and knocked on the door. I'll never forget.
Well, after the war, tell me about Lee and Bob. What were they like when they were children?
They were good kids, but they were boys. You know, you had to roughhouse them sometimes. They were good kids, but they were into things.
Yeah. Dad was telling me about one time he killed a rabbit at the farm and then woke you up with it.
Yes, happened it over my head. Greetings, he says. But you know, you raise boys and you expect those things.
Did Lee and Bob fight a lot, or did they get along pretty well, or?
Well, they had their.
We had some knockdown, drag out fights.
Right. Yeah. A difference in age,
Yeah.
you know.
I remember.
Lee was going to be the boss, no matter what. And Bob wasn't going to tolerate it. So here we go.
He didn't tolerate it. I remember he almost cold cocked me a couple of times.
Well,
And I almost cold cocked him. Do you remember in Liberty where we moved after the war, when I pulled the garage door down on his head?
yes. Wonder it didn't kill him. Oh, I tell you.
Do you remember when I poured turpentine all over the dog?
Yes.
Oh, Dad.
They could get into more trouble that was unusual.
Do you remember when I think his name was David Collins, and I
Yes,
got
yes.
in BB gun fights and tried to shoot each other with BB guns?
Right. Around the corners of the porches.
Mike and I did that a little bit too. So. Well, Bill, did he live with y'all when in the war years, or was this is afterwards, or did you just happen to live in a close area? Did Bill live with you all?
No, he just came to see Mom Herndon.
Okay,
He was a visitor.
right.
Now, as I recall,
When
Dan
Perk and Nell wanted to go somewhere, they sent Bill to them.
Gotcha.
Perk was not in the war.
No, he was not. But he would tell you everything about it.
But Charles was in the war.
Right, right. Yeah, Charles was a doctor. He was in the war. And, but Perk was. And Nell would not want discussions of those kinds.
Do you know why Perk was not in the war? Was he?
He was older,
Okay.
one of the age. He was an old man. Somebody told him, said, well, you too old. That's why you didn't go. Made him so mad he never. Oh, gosh. You know, Perk was the braggadocio. He was the one that was ruling the family, you know.
Do you remember when Jim was talking about Bill? Do you remember one time when Bill and I were with Perk and we were in Dublin, and Perk got out of his brand new Chevrolet, I believe it was a Chevrolet, and we took the cigarette lighter and burned holes in his upholstery while he was gone?
I don't remember that.
That was, he got on us pretty severely for that.
Well, I can imagine he would. Imagine Perk. Knowing Perk. That was the end of you all. Because Perk was very domineering. Perk was the head hoe. You know, he was the head man. I remember one time he was trying to tell me something, and I said, you can tell that to Louis all you want to, but you're not going to talk to me that way. So just cool it.
Well, let's talk about Lois's parents then. What do you remember about them?
Who?
Mom Herndon and her husband.
Mom Herndon was so good to me during the war. You know, she opened that big house and she said, you can live here as long as you want to. And I did.
Did you know Lois's dad much?
Didn't know him at all.
When did he die?
He died before we married.
He died in 1932,
Well,
the same year that Dad got out of college.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's right. I'd forgotten those. Yeah. No, I didn't know him.
Okay. Well,
And I walked into that family. And, you know, of course, I was teaching school in Bartlett, Texas, and Louis was an engineer there at the camp. And we met, and we married, and he took me home. And I can remember before we got to the house, and I thought, God, I hope she accepts me. And you know, I didn't know what to expect at all.
You had not met them before you...
No. And I went in, and I was very, very shy because I didn't know what to do. And but we got along fine from the very beginning. Mom Herndon and I did. We later talked about it, you know, after we knew each other pretty good, real good. And I said, I was scared to death, Mom, when I came in here. And she says, not worried about it too. And so we laughed about it, you know, because we became very, very close. Mom and I did. And she was awfully good to me.
what was her maiden name?
May Williams.
May Williams. Okay. I remember seeing some photos of her with some flowers. Was she a gardener?
Oh, yeah. She loved her flowers in her yard.
Yeah.
She had a beautiful yard. And she worked awfully hard in it, really, to keep it going, you know.
She had some lovely iris.
Yeah, that was one of her main things. I don't know how many varieties of iris she had. And she had a pretty yard, and she had somebody do the mowing, but she kept the beds.
How did she manage after her husband died?
What do you mean manage?
Well,
She stayed there in the house. Financially, you mean?
Yes, exactly.
Well, he had stock in the Higginbotham store,
Okay.
and that's what she lived on.
Okay.
And then, of course, she inherited the home there
Right.
because he had inherited it. It was the old Herndon home.
This is where Louis grew up.
Yeah.
Do you remember who built the home and when it was built?
No, I don't remember that. That was before my time. Because the Herndons built it. Miss Herndon built it.
You're talking
You
about.
remember, it was a big house.
You're talking about Dad's dad.
Yeah.
What was his name? Dad's name?
What was? I can't remember. He was the doctor.
We'll have to look that up. But Lewis's dad, what was his name?
His name was Grief
Yeah.
Perkins.
Grief Perkins Herndon. Yeah.
Because Perk was Grief Perkins Herndon Jr.
Junior. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I always thought that Grief was a very funny first name, but it was a family
Family name. Yeah. From way back in Virginia. The grandmother was named something Grief. You know.
Which grandmother, mother?
Your daddy's grandmother, I guess. Or your daddy's. All this is written down somewhere.
Okay, but try to remember. It was Dad's mother.
Yeah.
And her maiden name, then you think, was Grief.
Yeah.
Okay.
And all that's written down, where they came from and the town and all about it.
Are the Herndons all or mostly English or
Yeah, they came from England.
right?
3 brothers
Okay,
came over from England.
right.
And I remember that. Now where the other 2 were, I don't know.
I remember as a boy, you told me that the Herndon Monument at the Naval Academy in Annapolis in some way was related to those 3 brothers.
Right. I've forgotten that. I mean, it's written down somewhere.
Do you happen to know which of the 3 brothers that Lewis descended from?
No.
Okay.
The Williams part came from Mom Herndon's family.
Right. Okay, well, let's get back to Lee and Bob then when they were growing up. Where were you all when they were teenagers?
Liberty, Bryan, Fort Worth.
Right.
Where did you graduate from, Dad?
It was Pascal High School
School, Fort Worth.
in Fort Worth.
He was president of the senior class.
Right.
But before that, we were in Bryan, and we were in
Yeah.
Bryan for about how many years? How many years in Liberty that you remember?
Oh, gosh.
We must have lived in Liberty, Mom, to refresh your memory, from about 1946 to about 1951 or 52. And then we moved to Bryan from about 52 to 56. And we were in Fort Worth then from 56 on.
Yeah.
And Bob graduated from Pascal as well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And then you all both went to the University of Texas. Although Dad went to Texas A&M first,
Yeah.
For about
Right.
a year.
Yeah.
which is where Lewis went.
Yes.
And he was a big Aggie, I assume.
Yes. What were you there? Kids, there goes we. We're from Texas AMC.
Right.
Did he ever go to any of the games?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And when he stood up, he stood straight.
Tell us a little bit about what you remember of Bob and I growing up in Bryan. Little League Baseball and things like that.
We had the dogs there, you know.
Right.
We lived in that little bitty house. when we first moved there,
The little
which I
bitty,
hate.
the little bitty house, and I'm going on memory myself, was at 610 South Baker.
Right.
I don't know why I remember that.
Well, I don't either, but that's where it was.
610 South Baker.
And it was a little bitty house.
And then we moved to 404 some street. I can't remember the
It's
name.
right near town.
Yeah, it's not there now because they've torn all that down
Oh, have they?
when they built a new courthouse, and they
See, I haven't been there since.
404
Miss Fell owned that place.
Exactly, and she had a son named Jack,
Yeah.
and he used to take us on some camping trips.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah. He was a nice young
404
man.
East 26, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's right.
was the name of that street.
Yeah, it was just a couple of blocks from the office.
Right.
This is in Bryan as well.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's in Bryan.
Well, can you tell us anything else about Lee and Bob when they were teenagers then?
It was a constant watching.
Were they good kids?
Yeah.
Good.
They were always good kids. They got into trouble,
Yeah.
as all kids do. But they were good kids, basically.
Do you remember that I almost got thrown in jail for not paying a fine?
Yes,
That was
I could have killed you.
that was in high school, right?
Yeah.
Or right after high school. I can't remember, but they called you up and said we have a warrant out for your son's arrest. Is it?
Yes. I thought I would fall through the floor.
Remember seeing a photo also of Bob and a white car. Were they big?
That was his MG.
Yeah, that was his MG.
Can you remember a little bit about that?
Well, I remember the MG. There are pictures somewhere.
Yes, there are. There are.
Where are they?
Well, we've got. I'm sure Bob's got some of those pictures of his MG.
Well, where are my pictures?
Well, we'll find them.
Okay, Dad has a lot of memories too about the farm, and all I know really about it is that it's in DFW Airport. But where in DFW Airport is it?
Well,
It's right at the entrance. Part of that was right at the entrance as you're going in the south entrance to the airport. It's off to the right.
yeah, yeah.
Do you remember? That's where the farm pond was also, correct?
Right, right. I was trying to remember the name of those roads. One was Estelle Road.
One was
remember.
County Line Road.
Yeah, County Line was the road we turned off of the highway. County Line Road, and go on up. And then you crossed, remember when we got, used to be a church there,
Right.
and the road kind of zigged a little bit, you know, on up. And then after that zig was that was the farm.
If you kept on going straight at the zig, you would end up in the farm pond. And
No, you'd have to turn to the left
okay,
on that road. If you go straight, you wind up where the house was.
right, right.
All the structures have been removed.
Well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I haven't been in that area in so long.
Yeah, all the structures are gone. All you can see is hedgerows and remnants of farm ponds and this sort of thing.
Well, who owns all that now?
Well, that's on the Dallas-Fort Worth Airport property.
Still? I mean now?
Yes.
So your dad lived there until he passed at the farm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
He grew up, what is that, 183? The highway that runs, that we turn off of, to go up to the farm?
Yes.
Well, he lived there on the back of the farm was where he grew up was 183. And there was a pond there, I remember. Next time I'm in that area, I'm gonna make a little jaunt out there. See what's left, what I can remember.
Can you tell us a little bit about Aunt Susie?
Well,
Aunt Susie
it
was
was
Big
Dad's
Daddy's.
sister.
Right.
Dad had, and his family, he had two sisters, Aunt Susie and Aunt May. Aunt May lived in Deville, Oklahoma. Her name was May Dello. And
Where in Oklahoma?
Deville, D-E-V-O-L,
Okay.
Oklahoma. And then
Did he keep up with her much? Did you see her much?
well, I saw her occasionally because they were crazy about Daddy. Aunt Susie and Aunt May were crazy about Daddy. Because Daddy took care see, their mother died when they were young,
Okay.
the three of them. And Daddy was the oldest. And Daddy kind of looked after Aunt Susie and Aunt May. And so Daddy was their idol. And more or less a parent type thing. You know.
Well, I remember Aunt Susie, but did Aunt...
Well, Aunt May was never around very much.
Okay.
She lived in Oklahoma, and she didn't come very much. She married, and he wasn't, his daddy said, it didn't amount to the hill beans. I didn't remember him saying. He said she should have had more sense, but she didn't. That's her bed. Let her lie in it.
Well, I remember Aunt Susie had a pretty big house in Fort Worth.
Yeah. Yeah. Her husband was a doctor. And he died early, and she had all that big family to raise, you know.
One of her sons was named Green Trimble.
Right, and he was head of the vocational high school in Fort Worth.
Right. There was a high school now named after him.
Yeah, Green Trimble High School. Yeah. Or it was. I guess it's still there. I don't know. I'm sure it is, because it was a vocational high school. And Terrell lived in Fort Worth, but I never didn't know him that well. His wife didn't communicate too much with the family.
Did that side of the family have anything to do with Terrell, Texas?
No, well, that's where the Terrells came from originally, was Terrell, Texas. And that was my grandmother's area, family.
Okay, so there's some history associated.
There's some history associated with that, but now, I don't have any details on it,
Okay.
so.
Okay, well, let's fast forward again to the 50s and the 60s. Is there anything that you can remember specifically about that time period in your life?
Well, I don't remember,
Okay.
unless it was something that, you know.
Well, I know that Uncle Bob served in Vietnam.
Yeah. Those were very trying days, you know. You wondered every day what battles he was in, and this, and that, and the other, you know. 293rd. No, that was your daddy's.
That was Dad.
That was Dad's. 293rd Engineer Combat Battalion. Yeah. So, anyway.
And then I'm sure all the grandkids would like to know what you can remember about our births. Julie, Jim, Amy, Laura, and Mike. Of course, Mary Elizabeth, but that's later on.
Well, I have to go back. And all the some of that written down somewhere.
Yeah. I remember when Mike and Laura were born that was a tough time for my parents. Do you remember that specifically? Going to Illinois?
Yeah, yeah. They always called me for a little help at that time, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We sure did.
Yeah.
You go when Libby's father died in 1969. We flew back to Oklahoma, and you came up and stayed with Jim. And Jim was very, very young. As a matter of fact, you remember Mr. Took, his name was James W. Took.
Yeah.
He died in December of 1969. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
And
I don't remember
you
the
came
date.
up, and do you remember when Jim was born? Jim was born in Thanksgiving on 11/26.
Yeah.
He was a Thanksgiving baby,
Yeah.
1969. So Mr. Took died only about a month after he was born.
Yeah.
And you came up and stayed with Jim.
Yeah. Kept that baby.
Can you tell us about that at all?
Frightening. The care. I thought, God, what if something happens to this baby while I'm keeping him? And they're gone. But we made it.
Yeah. Well, Lewis, I remember him as a strong, silent type.
Dad? Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly. Strong, silent. But when he spoke, he was a great, great guy, really. He was. He, there wasn't too much fun about him. And, you know, I used to tease him a lot. Laugh more, you know.
Was he really pretty serious all the
Yeah,
time?
he was serious. When we first married, you know, and he'd be serious, I'd say, laugh more. I don't have anything to laugh about. Well, I'm going to make you laugh. And then he'd grin, you know. Great, great person. Great principles, you know. And hard-working person, really. Dear guy.
Do you remember one time we were sitting in a car in Liberty, Texas? I never will forget this. And it was a presidential election. And everybody thought that Thomas Dewey would be elected president. And Harry Truman came from behind and at the last minute and was elected president. And I remember you sitting in the front seat of the car with Dad, and Dad said something like, well, what a surprise. You know, he ought to just come out and gloat about that because it was that big of a shock.
I don't remember that.
I don't know why I remember that.
I don't either. Because well,
Except that was a big event.
it was a big event, but I don't remember it. You know.
What do you think Lewis was most proud of in his life?
His sons.
Yeah.
What else can you remember about Can you remember anything in particular about Dad that sticks in your mind? That
He was a hard-working person. He was a kind person, but you had to know him, you know, to see this kindness.
was he a pretty strict disciplinarian to
Yeah,
borrow?
yeah. Yeah, he was. But easy with his strictness, if you know what I mean. Conscientious about it. He was a very conscientious person. You know. I remember him saying to me a lot of times, "Do you think I'm right about this, Lou?" And if I said no, well, what did I do wrong?
Talking about memories, do you remember the time in Liberty, Texas, where we were eating crabs, and we had brought back a whole tow sack full of crabs,
Yes.
and you were going to cook the crabs on the kitchen stove, and so you dumped that entire tow sack full of crabs in the boiling
And
water.
they went all over the floor.
I remember that you were screaming and trying to get out of the way of some of these crabs.
Well, you know, they jump at you. I don't like them, except when I can eat them. But your daddy would get me into more situations like that.
Well,
We
tell
had
us
that
about,
great big pot. Where is that big pot?
I don't know, Mom. That was a pretty good sized pot. Tell us about some of the situations that Dad would get you into.
Well, I don't remember specifically, da.
I remember one time coming in, and I don't know how old I was, 6 or 7, into Liberty, and you had come home with us, I guess, from the grocery store, and there in the corner was his .22 rifle and a squirrel. And you saying, "Oh my gosh, I've got to clean that squirrel for dinner." And that's what we had for dinner.
I didn't clean it either.
You got Dad to do that.
I said, I'm not going to do that. And he said, "What do you mean? Mom always did." I said, "I don't care what your mom did. I ain't doing it." I didn't do that.
Well, I remember we had the squirrel for dinner.
I know, but
So
I
Dad-
didn't clean it. Your dad cleaned it. And he didn't like doing it either. But Mom Herndon did all that kind of stuff. But this Mom Herndon didn't.
Well, I remember in Liberty, you used to raise chickens, and we had.
I didn't raise chickens. Your daddy did. That wasn't my cup of tea at all.
Well,
And they never hit the ground. They were all raised above ground.
Right.
They never hit the ground.
And I remember he
In
used
cages.
he used to hang them upside down
When,
and cut their throats so they would bleed appropriately, but so you could cook them, right?
well, I didn't do that either. Your dad did that. That was his doings. Now, I'd help him clean them, and I would cook them. But I didn't do any of the killing. All right? Wasn't my cup of tea.
I remember one time you got awfully mad at me for throwing a broomstick through somebody's bicycle spokes.
Well, I don't remember that incident, but, you know.
One thing I also remember about Granddad is the tree that he would water behind your house on Country Club, and the pine tree, and how that was planted by the subdivision there, but it was the only tree that really grew to a significant size because he would water it constantly.
Yeah.
And he was a gardener too, or was
Oh,
that true?
yeah. Your dad, yeah. Louis he loved to watch things grow,
Mhm.
you know, to plant and grow, things like that. He loved his yard, you know. of course, we always had one of the prettiest yards in the neighborhood because he took care of it. I didn't do it. I had to help, but I wasn't the main care of it. Until after he died, then I had tried to keep it up.
Tell us a little bit about his work in the back of the house at 3541 Wedgeway Drive. Or 30, no, it was on Fuller, 3267 Fuller Drive in Fort Worth, Texas, where we lived when we moved to Fort Worth. Dad had a garden in the back of the house there on Fuller Drive, or Fuller Avenue, and he had a mulch pit, and apparently he would turn that mulch pit over and make all the neighbors mad.
Yeah, 'cause it smelled to heaven. It made me mad too. But he had his own way of doing things, and so he did it this way. I fuss about it, but didn't do it good. He was going to do it his way.
You all raised dogs as well. Was that his idea, or was that your idea?
Wasn't my idea.
Was it the boys' idea?
Yeah.
Okay. The Dalmatian?
I had to fit in with all kinds of things.
As I recall, how many dogs did we have? I remember when I was a little bitty
Bosco and Missy.
Well, even going back even further than that, didn't we have a Cocker Spaniel named Happy?
Yeah.
And that was...
That was a little dog that, I'm trying to think of his name. Leb's father-in-law raised cockers, and he gave that dog to you kids. It was how we got Happy. And
by Lib's father-in-law, do you mean somebody named Ryan? She was married to Wallace Ryan.
Yeah.
And this was Mr. Ryan's father then.
Yeah.
And that's how we got the dog, little Cocker Spaniel, black Cocker Spaniel named Happy.
Yeah. Precious little dog, I like that little dog. I didn't like some of the dogs y'all had, but I liked Happy.
Well, let's see. Let me try to refresh your memory about some of the dogs. The one after Happy that I remember, we had Righty and
Gosh, Lee, I haven't even thought about those
Righty
things.
and Lefty, the Dalmatians in Fort Worth.
Yeah.
And then we had
They had black ears.
We had some beagles, right?
Yeah, you all raised beagles. I put up with it all.
And then I remember one dog that we had in Fort Worth that you particularly didn't like, and I remember you throwing a fit about it. Dad bought a boxer, and the boxer started eating the house. He ate through a wall. Y'all left him.
A corner of a wall.
He ate through a corner of a wall at our house on Fuller.
Right.
And so you had Dad made him a dog house outside, and he ate part of the dog house. And you decided maybe that was enough, that you would get rid of that particular dog.
That was the end of that dog. At the Herndon household. I felt sorry for the dog, but I couldn't have something eating the house down. Sorry about that.
Well, okay. What do you think was the most difficult time in your life?
War years,
Yeah.
when Louis was gone and I had the kids. And, I wasn't settled. I would either stay at Mom Herndon's or go to my home, hadn't bought a house. I didn't have a home. Those were hard years. You managed to live, and they were all good to me, There wasn't any, they were all, did everything they could to try to keep me happy. But they were hard years for me, because I felt like I was imposing. I didn't feel secure at all. So when the war was over, I said, we're going to have a home. It's going to be my home. And I've tried to even here, my home, you know.
What about the most enjoyable time or times in your life, would you say?
Oh, gosh.
Well, you enjoyed liberty. I remember right after the war when you were in Liberty and you had a good friend named Beth Jordan.
Yes, yes. Whatever happened to Frank?
I think Frank ended up, of course, he went to the University of Texas.
Yes, I know.
And I think Bob keeps up with Frank. And,
Does
and
he?
I believe Frank has some sort of yachting business in the Bahamas or in the Caribbean somewhere that he does that sort of thing. Apparently, he ended up very wealthy.
Well, you would know, Frank would. But lost track of him completely through the years. And that's too bad.
Well, that was with the question that Jim just asked you about your enjoyable times. I remember as a kid that you seemed to be very happy in Liberty.
Yeah,
You were a den mother also.
yes.
Can you tell us about being a den mother?
Kept me working constantly. Activities for the den. I was so glad to give that up, I didn't know what to do. Let somebody else do that chore for a while. You know, it just kept constant. What are you going to do with these kids? All these boys coming around. Yeah.
Your dad was a scoutmaster.
Yes, I know. We went through some years there that were pretty rough as far as activities go. Pleasant, but busy, but, you know, grinding.
You were a school teacher. What
Right.
grades did you teach?
Huh?
What grades did you teach?
Fourth grade.
Fourth grade.
Yeah.
And when was this? Was this when?
That was right after I got out of college. When I was in Bartlett, Texas.
Okay. Well, were you doing it when Lee and Bob were older too? Were you teaching then?
Yes, high school reading.
Yeah, high school, but I
And-
was in the reading department
Okay, you taught both in Bryan for a while
and in Fort Worth.
and in Fort Worth.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did you teach in Bryan? Was it
Sixth grade, I think.
Okay, was it reading or was it something else?
I know it was a grade,
Okay.
but then when I went to Fort Worth, they put me in. They asked me to take charge of the reading department.
And
I
you
mean-
did real well because you were president of the Fort Worth Reading
Association, yes. Those were busy years.
And I'm assuming that the retirement years were very good years during that period. When both of y'all were retired.
Yeah.
Got to travel around a little bit.
Yeah.
Where did you move immediately after Dad retired?
Where were we living before he retired?
Well, before he retired, you were in the Washington D.C. area in Springfield on Carly Parkway, and then when you left Carly Parkway, you moved to Lakeway in Austin.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about Lakeway.
Well, we had a good time in Lakeway. We had a little house. Your dad worked awfully hard to fix that place up, the yard and all. It was a pretty little place by the time he got through with it.
Was this right on Lake Travis, or was
No.
it?
It was on one of the streets going in,
Okay.
going up to the club. And the house is still there. The yard is still fixed like it was when your dad fixed it.
Was
You
it?
know.
Is it on the golf course?
Yeah. Yeah, it was on the golf course.
And a good friend of yours was Curly Lockhart.
Art Lockhart. Yeah, Curtis' dad, Gene, still lives there. I occasionally hear from Gene. Of course, years change things.
His name
We
was
changed.
Warren Lockhart,
Yeah,
and his wife's name was Jean.
yeah, right.
And then when do you remember the year that you moved from the Austin area, from Lakeway to Fort Worth to Mansfield?
No, I don't remember the year. It's written down somewhere.
I think, Mom, it was, if memory serves, it was about 1973.
I don't remember, Lee. It's all written down somewhere.
Okay, well, one thing that I remember a lot from you talking to us is not to hate other people. I remember you constantly telling us children not to hate, and I think I got from you a lot of being proud in yourself and having respect for others. What kind of family traditions would you like to see passed down to your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren?
Being good citizens and always for treating your fellow men right.
Good. Would you have any other advice for, say, Hannah or Mary Elizabeth or Archer?
Always be honest. Always be true to your family. I, faith in God is the main thing. To lead you. Stand by you when you're in trouble.